Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Lobo Tigre. I'm the CEO, Chief Investment Officer, Chief Writer, and Bottle Washer of the Independent Speculator.com. And today we're having another edition of In the Pit, and our victim of the day is Dale Wallster. He's the CEO of Southern Empire Resources, which came up on my radar because of an interesting pivot northwards, which I guess you'll tell us about. But Dale, why don't you go ahead and give us an overview of your company and what you're working on, and then I got a bunch of questions for you.
Sure. Well, good to be here. Southern Empire has not been around for very long. It's a company that started trading subsequent to the completion of a qualifying transaction with a capital pool company called Owl Capital. And we completed the qualifying transaction in March and started trading in March. And here we are in September the 1st. Hard to believe that we're already in September. The company was initially formulated or focused on some gold projects in the American Southwest, and quite exciting in Nevada and in California. And subsequent to that, we've just recently announced a transaction with a company called Mass Gold Corp, in which we will be moving towards continued exploration in the province of Saskatchewan. So even though our name is Southern Empire and it was originally named that, I have some very good friends who had Northern Empire, and I thought I'd give them a little poke in the ribs, and so Southern Empire became the name of our company. But having said that, our focus will be gold in North America, basically.
All right, fair enough. That's an excellent overview. So why don't you walk me through the rationale for the Mass Gold transaction? I mean, it looked like with the Oro Cruz, oxide, high grade, near surface, it looks pretty exciting. And this is a completely different ball of wax. Why would you do that?
It is. There's a number of reasons why the transaction came to be. I think one of the reasons that's quite important is that there's a couple of people on the Mass side who are also very integral on the Southern Empire side. Ron Netolitzky is chairman and CEO of Mass Gold, and he's chairman of Southern Empire. Andy Davidson, who's the CFO of Southern Empire, is the CFO of Mass Gold, as well as a director of Mass Gold. Dave Tupper is technical. He's the VP Exploration of Southern Empire, and he's also VP X for Mass Gold. So one of the key things is we, meaning the combined management, so to speak, have obviously a very good understanding of the underlying assets in the LaRange Gold Belt. Netolitzky has been there for a long, long time. I'm originally from Saskatchewan and have had considerable success in the province. I put together a company originally to look for uranium called Rough Rider Uranium that got taken over by Hathor, which subsequently got taken over by Rio Tinto.
That would be where I know your name from. Sorry, I remember Rough Rider.
It's a great jurisdiction. It's the LaRange Gold Belt in particular is very underexplored. It hasn't had any serious exploration for a long time. Most people out there, when they look at Saskatchewan, they say, well, there's potash and there's uranium, but is there gold in Saskatchewan? And up until 2012, when at the time Claude Resources, now SSR Mining, nobody had produced, let me backtrack a bit, no primary gold producer had produced over 1 million ounces in the province. There had been more than 1 million ounces produced as byproduct from the Flin Flon camp, the Saskatchewan side of the Manitoba border in the Flin Flon camp had produced probably around 3 million ounces or so. But Saskatchewan, until Claude, went over 1 million ounces, and now SSR, I think they're at about 1.6 million ounces from the CB Santoy gold operations. They've got another probably 10 years reserves in front of them. It's a very, very serious gold operation that they're running, and that's 60 kilometers away as a crow flies from where Moss's properties are. That's one of the things. Obviously, with common management and such, there's savings to be had on the down the road with regard to running a public company, your audits and your legals and so on and so forth. And I think one of the key things that I believe is that the ability, obviously, in Canada to raise money with using flow through, and one of the other key things in doing some of our work down in the States, I think the maximum our exchange rate since March was $1.42, and when you start changing money at a $1.42, it's a real blow. It's hard to swallow. We love the idea of gold in the United States, in California, in Nevada. We've got a terrific potential in our projects down there, and the Oro Cruise has had some. It's a past producer. It produced as recently as 1996. It was then run by a company called MK Gold, which was an American listed together with Hecla. And they had an operation called the American Girl Mining Joint Venture. So in 96, when gold prices were headed down and were looking pretty bleak, they packed up shop and left the area. And we were able to put together the Oro Cruise project. We hold it in very high esteem. We think that ultimately we will be well over 1 million ounces there. Ultimately, we're quite a ways from it now. We have a historical resource of 341,000 ounces, 2.2 grams, and that's oxide. That's all very positive. We believe we can substantially add to that. And now I'm rambling and have to think back to
the question. No, that's good. Well, let's come back to Oro Cruise. So the rationale of the transaction was where we started, and I can certainly see the synergies. One could wonder, well, if with so much overlap.
There's one other thing that I think is critical, and in my objective is to grow ounces very quickly, and the Moss transaction takes us from a historical resource at Oro Cruise of 341,000, and if everything goes the way it should, we should add another 500,000 ounces to the equation in very short order with the Moss transaction, and then we believe we can grow that quickly in further exploration in Saskatchewan, and ultimately grow it again with our American opportunities.
All right. So again, to wrap up with the transaction, I get the synergies idea. I have to say I hadn't really thought recently about the USD CAD conversion and the impact there, but if you're raising money in Canada, having a Canadian project to spend it on, especially with flow-through tax benefits, makes sense. So I kind of have to wonder, why weren't Oro Cruise and Eastgate just picked up in Moscow to begin with that much synergies? But okay, let's let that be. I get it. I'm okay with the transaction, but um, I have to say, because my readers, they obviously know Ron, and back in my Casey research days, we followed Golden Band, so we know that Ron's not only been there for a long time, he's been kicking these same rocks for a long time. So we can bring
Yes,
some
he
ounces
has.
on, but what's really going to make it different this time? What is Southern Empire going to bring to the equation now that's really going to make this go?
Well, I think I think that there's a number of things, and first and foremost has got to be the fact that in general the junior miners that or junior exploration companies we're on a bit of a tear right now, and the ability to raise money and in these markets is it's probably the best we've seen in quite some time. And we have a great team, and we believe that we will be able to raise significant amounts of capital moving forward. Since we went public, we've raised over $7 million in the qualifying transaction. We raised three some odd million, and then we at 30 cents a share. Then we followed it up with another private placement in towards the end of June, early July at 50 cents a share, and so yeah, we're very confident in our abilities to raise money, and I think that uh, in Saskatchewan, in the Larange Gold Belt, there has not been a concerted exploration effort in a long time. And with the abilities to finance and uh, I think that's key to extensive drill programs. And obviously, the more that one can drill, the better one's chances of coming up with that significant deposit are.
So the short version would be, this is finally going to get the exploration it deserves and hasn't had for a long time.
Yeah, that's a pretty good way of putting it.
All right, right. I just thinking about your timeline there. You must have been pulling at that hair of yours when you come out of the gate in March. Like, oh my God, what a time! But wow, what a rebound! It turns out, I mean, it couldn't have been better. Your stock went straight up from your initial. I don't know if you did an IPO, but when you started trading, the stock pretty much just went straight up for months.
It did. It was an interesting lead up to it. We announced the original qualifying transaction with Owl Capital, and Owl Capital was a company that James Hutton put together. And I don't know if you know James, but James ran some of the biggest flow-through funds in the country, Canada, Dominion, and so on and so forth. And James was one of my original shareholders in Rough Rider Uranium. And we talk about things every now and then, and back last spring of 2019, in March or so, James and I were talking, and he said, I got a capital pool company. It's called Owl Capital, and I would really like to do a gold deal, but my partners in Owl, they want to do a pot deal. But I think gold is turning, and I think the time to do a gold deal is now. And I said, well, James, if you want to do a gold deal, I got this property, down in Southern California in Imperial County, which is one of the best, probably the best mining county in California. I said, we're about 15 miles away from the Mesquite mine, and Ross Beatty had just taken over Mesquite with Equinox, and I said, but you got to see some of these high-grade drill results that are just sitting there on the Oro Cruz property. So I went over to James's place, and we sat down, had a cup of coffee, and looked at this map that I showed him, and he said, holy crap, I let's do this deal. And quite honestly, we thought it would be a lot quicker than what it was. and we were back and forth with the regulators and the exchange with regard to the qualifying transaction, and we got into a couple arguments with them regarding the 43101 and all the standard regulatory hurdles you got to go through. And the lawyer kept saying, well, I think we'll get conditional approval any minute. Well, we didn't get conditional approval until mid to late November. And now you're sitting there going, well, it's Christmas time. How am I going to go out and raise money at Christmas time? and it was like, oh, So Christmas came and went, and we started down the path to raising money in January, and leading up to PDAC, it was great. And then we were oversubscribed. We came out of PDAC, and COVID hit, and we managed to get the transaction closed. A little bit of money fell off the table, but we closed it, and we thought, wow, things are cratering. We're pretty lucky and pretty fortunate. But that's a testament to the people that in my mind, that were involved. There's myself, there's Ron, there's Brian Slusarchuk, there's James Houghton, there's Latika Prasad, and Jim Curry. And we had a great team of directors, and on the corporate front, we've got Dave Tupper and Lubitsa Kiri and Andrew Davidson, and we've got a great team, and there I am. I'm rambling again. Okay,
well, it went in the right direction. It's all good. So, and it's quite an interesting story for the times. It's actually kind of inspiring, if I do say so. What a time. All right, but so really the core asset at the time was Oro Cruise. You've also got the Eastgate, which we can come back to. Oro Cruise was the core idea, and I get it. But it's not clear to me, looking at the presentation, I think it's slide 15, there's all these historic drill results. There's no pit on that. So I don't know how much of that is left, and I don't know how many of those historic drill results that you were just talking about, are they still there? Have they been mined out? Tell me the basic thesis here. How much is left, and what makes you think there's more to be had?
So at Oro Cruise, they so let me backtrack. In the area, there's in the immediate area of the Oro Cruise gold project, there's effectively there's the Oro Cruise, which is also known as Tumco and Golden Cross and so on and so forth. And then there's the American Girl and the Padre Madre. So in the mid 80s, Newmont had developed what they at the time referred to as a mineable reserve that I think it was 1986, Adolph Lundin and a company called Eastmac Gold Mines took over or bought from Newmont the American Girl package of land, excuse me, which was the American Girl and the Padre Madre. And he raised money through James Capel and in Eastmac Gold Mines, and he started to work at developing the American Girl and Padre Madre together, called the American Girl Mining Joint Venture. He brought in Morrison Knudsen Corporation, which is what at the time was a very, very large engineering consulting group in the US. And he brought them in as a mining contractor, is my understanding. And ultimately, Morrison Knudsen became a joint venture partner and operator through a company that they created called MK Gold. In the meantime, Eastmac was taken over by Ross Beatty's original Equinox, and then that was taken over by Hecla. So between the mid 80s and up to about 1994, 95, the mining in the area was the American Girl ore bodies and the Padre Madre ore bodies. And those were both open pit and underground operations. As things were winding down at American Girl, they cut a deal to acquire the Oro Cruz portion of the general area. And they did that by way of a mining lease from a fellow in Reno. And so they went back, they resubmitted all the required environmental impact statements and stuff for the Oro Cruz portion of the operation. And they started mining and development there, and they actually mined for about a year. They produced 61,000 ounces in between 95 and 96. The bulk of that was from two open pits. There was what they call the Queen Pit and the Cross Pit. And if you go to our website, I believe there should be a flyby on the website. That's a great way to get an overview of the Oro Cruz, and in particular, the Oro Cruz underground. So as part of these operations, they roughly 3 kilometers of underground workings that are still in pristine shape. And we're not talking little rat holes. This is really, really great development work that they did. So they got underground, they mined a little bit underground, and then, as I say, in 1996, the gold prices were heading south, and they shut everything down. They did some rehabilitation and walked away. So the property has had basically no work on it since 1996.
So it reverted to the guy in Reno, and is that who you picked it up from? How did you get this deal?
So that portion of the property, the Oro Cruz or Tumco portion, reverted back to the fellow in Reno. The fellow in Reno had another guy who used to be with Texas Gulf Sulfur. Texas Gulf was a considerable sized mining company back then, and Texas Gulf had previously leased the property from him. And while the mining operations were happening of the American Girl Mining Joint Venture, the fellow in Reno had hired this former manager of Texas Gulf to oversee his portion of the ground. So ultimately, the lease ended, the property went back to the guy in Reno. Ultimately, the Texas Gulf guy ended up controlling 20 key claims covering the known mineralization at Oro Cruz. That was then, at one point in time, dealt to a company here in Vancouver called Lincoln Gold. And Lincoln Gold, turns out that back to Netolitzky being around forever and a day, Ron had an association with Lincoln, and through Ron's association with Lincoln, and I actually also had for lack of a better word, a relationship with Paul Saxon at Lincoln. So Ron and I together cut the deal with Lincoln that would allow us to earn a 75% interest in the property, and subsequent to which Ron, through some debt obligations that Lincoln had to him. He acquired the other 25%, and we basically acquired that 25% from Ron at no bump. So now we're sitting, we have an option to acquire 100% of the Oro Cruz project.
Okay, very good. Another quite a story. So let me invite you to do a bit of arm waving. I'm still not crystal clear on what the sort of immediate targets and potential here is. Basically, you're saying there was a known resource and historical resource, and they just scratched the surface of it. So we take 61,000 ounces out of what we had before, and we assume that's there, and it's still wide open. And how wide open? Or
yeah. So
what are your targets?
At the American Girl deposits, the American Girl and the satellite deposits of that, and the Padre Madre, and Oro Cruz itself, the Cross and Queen deposits. The American Girl Mining Joint Venture probably mined in the neighborhood of 500,000 or so ounces. And this is all oxide, and there was a combination of high grade and lower grade. So they were pitting the lower grade. They went underground on some of the high grade. They mined all this oxide material. Turn of the last century, there was probably also around, for sake of argument, 150,000 ounces. I mean, who really knows? Interesting historical fact here, the Cargo Muchacho Mountains, which is where Oro Cruz is located. Cargo Muchacho means loaded boy. And there are some who would argue that this was the first gold mining operation in the United States of America when the Spanish were there way back when they first showed up in California and were moving north. And the story goes that a couple of young boys went out into the mountains and came back, and their shirts were loaded with gold when they came back. So that's Cargo Muchacho or loaded boys. So there's been significant historical production from the Oro Cruz area. There's currently 340,000 ounces of historical resource at Oro Cruz. We're looking at the exploration potential for plus 1 million ounces. We are very fortunate in that we have a very bright young geologist she's currently doing her PhD at University of Southern California. And one of the things she's working on is structural studies and timing of gold mineralization at Oro Cruz. And structure is key here. And we think that we see all kinds of opportunity for new drill targets to be developed. We also see, one of the key things is what wasn't ore back in the 90s could be ore today. If you look at what Mesquite are doing, and they're, as I say, they're 15 or so miles away. Mesquite have now drilled off, or Equinox Gold at their Mesquite mine operations, have now drilled off their old waste dumps and are mining their old waste dumps at, and expecting to produce a lot of gold from that. So one of the things that we're looking at and quite excited about is at Oro Cruz, we have 2 existing historical heap leach pads that we've gone out and we've taken surface grab samples. So just okay, let's dig up some of the heap and send it off to the lab, and the results from those have come back at greater than generally speaking greater than half a gram, and that's ore grade. A lot of
Sitting there ground up and waiting to go.
operations.
I get that. So I noticed that was on your planned work for this year, is to define that. And since you know the geometry, a couple drill holes, would you expect to be able to put out a 43101 resource on that by the end of this season?
Our objective is to, and it's now this month, we're targeting getting a sonic drill rig. We're permitted from the BLM to go in and, using sonic drilling, drill off or drill a number of holes in the existing 2 heap leach pads. We want to get those drill holes in there. We want to do some volumetric calculations to see what the tonnage is. We have some ideas what the tonnages of those leach pads are, but we want to just nail it down. We want to get them drilled off. And yes, we're quite keen on the possibility of those 2 historical leach pads containing quite a bit of gold.
I noticed I noticed the permitting on the drilling, and I was wondering why the sonic drill. I can see where you don't want to use a core rig on a bunch of gravel.
The sonic drill, just because it's a great tool for drilling unconsolidated sediment, and effectively that's what these leach pads are. I mean, it's quick, it's fast, it's relatively inexpensive. It'll give us, a 4-inch diameter sample from the top of the heap to the bottom of the heap. We'll send quite a significant amount of that for further metallurgical test work, and then based on the assay results, the volumetric calculations, the metallurgical test work, we expect that we should be able to, in the not too distant future, develop a resource for those historical heap leach pads. And there's also significant waste dumps that we're just starting to think about now, given the fact that the guys down the road are mining their waste dumps. But the key exploration focus at Oro Cruz ultimately has to be the very high grade intercepts that were encountered along the down dip extensions of the Oro Cruz ore body as we know it.
So is the primary target there really underground mining?
Yes. I mean, barring. Look,
at $2,000 gold, I get it. A lot of halo could actually work, but who knows how long that's going to last?
California is tough on open pit mining because of the backfill rules and so on and so forth. We've got, as I say, 3 kilometers of underground workings that are in pristine shape. Tupper and I there's water at about the 500 foot below surface mark. We're not sure we don't know whether that's groundwater or if that's been rainwater over the last 30 years or whatever, to 20, since the mid 90s. But the workings are in terrific shape, and so our primary exploration goal, as it sits to date, for Oro Cruz, is to get underground and drill from underground to expand the high grade mineralization that we see there.
Well, that's interesting. So primary is to get underground and drill from underground. And would there be also a few surface holes just to sort of confirm? I mean, it seems like it'd be quick and easy. And if you want to extend and say, okay, does it continue on strike?
Well, once again, if you go to the flyby, right? And I really hate to say this, I believe it's posted on the website. If it isn't, I will most certainly make sure that it's up there shortly. If you go to the flyby, you can actually, when you go over the cross pit, you'll see a considerable pit pushback that was prepared for future open pit mining. And as I say, the they walked.
They got
So
it. Okay.
yeah, there has to be significant reason to be looking at open pit opportunities in the area. It's just, as I say, California is a little tougher on open pit than they are on underground.
All right. If the flyby you're asking about is something with the YouTube looking play button on the project page, then it is there. So we can tell the viewers it is there. Okay. All right. So let's not get lost in the weeds here. Targets for oil crews are your underground confirmation and resource definition, getting those leach pads defined, and then regional exploration, yes or no, or later?
Yes, from the regional perspective, the work that was done by Newmont and Eastmac and Hecla and Morrison Knudsen, there's a lot of regional work that has been done. Obviously, there's by regional I mean property scale, and there's a lot of reason to be looking at other areas of the property and to look at other underground opportunities. There was underground operations at American Girl as well, and that's a whole different
Okay. And
possibility.
sorry, still staying in California. Can you quickly outline your Midas metaphor for Eastgate? I mean, I looked at it and I like that section you have on the presentation. It's very impressive. But that's just one section. Midas has a bunch of veins there, and you know the Klondike guys found more after they got it from Newmont. And so, what makes you think that Eastgate is a Midas analog, and what are your targets for exploration there?
Well, we did some drilling earlier in the year at Eastgate. I think we put down 6 holes, and we've been waiting for final assay results on those. We should have those imminently. My interest in Eastgate was piqued because of the low sulfidation epithermal vein type of targets. Those can be spectacular when you have them. They can be tricky to define, and you know, when they work, as in Midas, they're tremendous. But you know, and now I've got to get back to Ron and to Netolitzky's perspective. So one of the things that Netolitzky liked about Eastgate was also the high grade nature or potential high grade nature of it. And one of his objectives was in the neighborhood in another company that he's involved with, not that far away, they're developing a project called Bell Mountain. And Bell Mountain is low grade bulk tonnage. It's not that big, but it's a low grade pittable operation. And the possibility we were at one time looking at the possibility of supplementing their lower grade with high grade from Eastgate. And I hate to do this, but I have to run and just grab my power cord and get plugged in because I've got a battery warning here. I'm so sorry.
Go ahead.
I'll be right back.
And we have the sounds of Puerto Rico in the background. Good timing. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you're still watching this at this moment, you now have proof that we do not edit these videos for content. You get what we get.
It is what it is, right?
As they say. All right, so Eastgate, results pending, and then depending on how those come out, that's when we know where you go next there?
Well, I would say with regard to Eastgate, yeah, when we get the results and analyze them, and then we'll figure out how we move forward with Eastgate.
All right. And overall, I get the impression from the transaction and even just what you've said to me today, as excited as you are about these opportunities, is it fair to say you're even more excited about Larange and that the mass resources are now going to be the top priority? Or, I mean, you, according to what I saw in your plans, you only have 2,500 meters planned at Oro Cruz and 5,000 meters planned at up north in Saskatchewan. So it kind of sounds like your pivot north is pretty big for you.
Well, and there's I think the pivot north will help us. Capital markets are fickle. It's a fickle thing, right? And there's a great demand for news and ongoing news and continual news, and let's get some more news into the equation as well. And I'll be blunt. The ability to move forward expeditiously and quickly in a large-scale manner in Saskatchewan will help us to keep that news flow coming, so to speak. For instance, we have drilling planned in Saskatchewan pending the completion of the Moss Gold transaction. And we put out a news release on that the other day. And that's just phase one. And, in contrast to that, when you're dealing with the Bureau of Land Management and various regulatory bodies in the States, they have a completely different outlook and, restrictions on your ability as an exploration company to move forward rapidly and expeditiously and do things in a manner that makes the most sense. And for instance, I don't know how familiar you are with BLM permitting, if you are looking at an area of under 5 acres of disturbance, then you can typically permit through a notice of intent application and so on and so forth, which is not a great thing, but it doesn't allow you the scale to move forward with the exploration programs that you really want to move forward with. And in contrast to that, Saskatchewan being one of the best mining jurisdictions in the world, and particularly given our knowledge of Saskatchewan, we can very quickly, pending funding being in place, get large exploration programs underway throughout the year. In Saskatchewan, typically you can drill all year long, except that freeze up or break up and through the freeze. A good number of the holes that we have planned in Saskatchewan for the initial round are land-based, so we can drill there, and the Moss Gold properties are, for the most part, all within 10 kilometers or less of a provincial highway. So we can pretty much drill there year round.
Sure. And if you can drill in the winter, but it's more expensive, but you have a southern property that, maybe by then the BLM will approve your plan of operation. We don't need to bother with the acronym. And
yeah.
Get you
well,
going.
we refer to it as a mine plan of operations. It's better than the plan of operations acronym.
Yes, I probably don't need to go there, but I have to ask. Just a lot of people are going to say California, isn't that leftist paradise, and the tree huggers aren't they going to come out and stop you? I know Imperial County, but can you please address California risk for us?
It it it's substantial from the perspective of there are a lot of, as you refer to them, tree huggers and such in that part of the world. Look, Imperial County is not San Francisco, it's not Los Angeles, it's not San Diego. It's a pretty, other than the agriculture that happens in the valley itself, boy, oh boy, it is pretty barren and pretty bleak and pretty rugged in places. A lot of ground there is actually military, bombing ranges and artillery ranges and such. Imperial County, in my mind, is as I think I said earlier, probably the best county in California to be located. Our operations are in an area of historical mining. There's already greatly disturbed areas from the past operations. And so we believe as long as we can continue forward with our permitting and dotting the I's and crossing the T's and doing the requisite studies, and that ultimately we'll be successful in being able to bring a mine into production, the metal gods willing,
Ultimately.
Imperial County.
Let's flip back over the border. We've already been going 45 minutes here, so we should probably wrap this up. But I have to ask real quick, back across the border in Nevada, you've got almost a 5% stake in the Bullfrog mine, which has now become, that's become, surprise to almost everybody. Beating Nevada has become mining central, and there's so much activity there now. But Bullfrog's been poked for a long time. How optimistic are you, or why would you be optimistic that 5% will do anything for you? What's the outlook there?
So, Bullfrog Mining is run by a gentleman, Dave Beeling, who's a mining engineer, and he's been working on Bullfrog for the last 10 plus years. He's hugely optimistic about being able to take that project and move it forward and ultimately get it into production. He's got ground that is part and parcel of the old Barrick Bullfrog, and I know he's been in active discussions with Barrick about taking on the rest of the ground that he doesn't have under option from them already. With that last piece to his puzzle, and I think Dave will be able to structure something with Barrick to acquire that. And when he does, I think he's sitting on a tremendous opportunity there for further exploration, particularly along what's something called Paradise Ridge, which is effectively the same rhyolitic host to the Barrick Bullfrog and the mineralization that Dave's looking at elsewhere on his property. Paradise Ridge only has 2 drill holes into it that we're aware of, or that I'm aware of, and a huge opportunity to be a game changer for Bullfrog gold moving forward.
All right, so you have a 4.93 or whatever it is, you almost 5% carried interest. You don't have to do anything. You can just sit back and enjoy the results.
Well, it's an equity position in their company.
Okay.
And together with our warrants, I think we could go up over 10%. I'm not sure the exact number offhand, but yeah. And we're looking at opportunities for other acquisitions, particularly in Nevada and California and in the Southwest states and in Saskatchewan.
All right. So to sum it all up, can you tell us what your exploration budget is? I think we have an idea of your targets and your exploration goals, but what is the exploration budget for this year, and how much cash do you have in the bank?
I think we've got somewhere approximately 4.5 million Canadian dollars. Don't forget $1.42, that really hurt. We're looking at spending about 2.5 million in Saskatchewan. We're looking at forging ahead in California, and we'll see where we end up with in Nevada. As I mentioned to you, our plans are aggressive. We want to ramp up the number of ounces we have, and the quickest, simplest way of doing that will be Saskatchewan. I would like to think that perhaps we'll add a flow-through component to our financing efforts later in the season, perhaps. Yeah, that's
Okay. All right. Well, keep us posted on that. We have a lot of viewers out there who like private placements if there's a non-brokered component. So let us know. And finally, I have to ask you the question I always ask everybody is the skin in the game question. If you would like my audience out there to put their own hard-earned money into this deal, how much of your own have you put in, Dale?
That's an interesting question, and I've been asked this by other people, and people have said, I want to be aligned with the founders' capital. I want to be in the same position that you're in this company, and to which my reply for this company is, oh, I'd gladly have you aligned with me, because my equity in Southern Empire comes not just mine, my friends, some close friends, and my family. We're all invested in the underlying private entity going back to probably about 10 years ago. And we put a lot of money into the private company, and we headed to South America at the time. And so now we have the wonderful position of being all escrow shareholders in Southern Empire. And a lot of the money that went into the private equity, or pardon me, into the private company went in at higher prices than the initial 30-cent price of Owl Capital when we went public.
Okay, fair enough. I understand. There's also clearly a great deal of sweat equity in that story, and you've been in there for a long time, and clearly you're not looking to exit right away.
No, historically, in things that I've done, I like to look at 3 to 5 year time frames, and I think those have worked well for me with regard to public companies. They can be longer, they can be shorter. When we did Hathor, we did the transaction. Rough Rider Uranium did the transaction with Hathor in the summer of 2006, and Rio Tinto took us all out in very first part of 2012. The Rio Tinto transaction, Rio Tinto Cameco fight started happening in late 2011, but closed in early 2012. So, that's a reasonable time frame, and I think we can seriously grow Southern Empire over the next 5-6 years, and hopefully have a similar outcome to the last time around.
All right. Well, I'll salute you for that. Wish you the very best of luck, and please do keep us posted.
Will do, and thank you kindly for this opportunity, and stay tuned.
Indeed.
Okay, thanks.